Yo guys, how's it going? Welcome back into the Rover Sports Show. I am excited about the national title game tonight. Joe Burrow against Trevor Lawrence. It is going to be fun. There is zero doubt about it. I'm really, excited for the contest. I'm excited to see Trevor Lawrence against Joe Burrow. I believe that Clemson's going to win. LSU's just going to press too much, but I'm really rooting for LSU because this is one of the only times that they should be able to get to the college football championship. Joe Brady eventually is going to leave LSU. Miles Brennan is not going to be as good as Joe Burrow. The receivers, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a special LSU Tigers team. And Clemson is just going to reload. They're going to dominate the ACC continuously with their recruiting, which is excellent. And Dabo Swinney will just reload, and they'll probably be back in the championship game next year with Trevor Lawrence and with elite receivers. So this game means more to LSU than it does Clemson, and I really hope LSU wins the game. But Clemson is the underdog. Dabo Swinney's going to use that up. Clemson also has Isaiah Simmons. They have some good guys in the interior that can draw. I think they were number one in terms of generating pressure on the quarterback. So it is going to be a great contest down in New Orleans in the Superdome, which I'm excited about tonight. But let's talk about the coaching carousel, the assistant carousel. George Edwards fired from the Minnesota Vikings now. Xavier Rhodes, Zendejo, Anthony Barr. That defense kind of got older, and that defense lost a lot of pop and a lot of sizzle. Now, Minnesota's been pretty good. They don't really spend a lot in free agency with Thomas Dimitroff there as their GM. So I always get him confused with the GM of the Falcons. So Dimitroff could be with Dan Quinn, or Dimitroff could be with Mike Zimmer. But George Edwards ended up getting fired. But George Edwards, though, still very successful. 2016, good defense. 2017, really good defense. And I remember Minnesota, I know they had Case Keenum, they had Christian Ponder a bunch of those years. Who did Minnesota try to draft in to be a quarterback? I believe it was Teddy Bridgewater, so they still had some good years going back a couple of years. Teddy Bridgewater, they got to host a playoff game at the Minnesota Gopher Stadium when the Humphrey Dome was going under some reconstruction before Bank of America Stadium happened. George Edwards, I think, is a pretty good defensive coordinator. Somebody's going to get a good DC, and I would expect Minnesota, maybe Kevin Stefanski, to interview George Edwards for that position. Wade Phillips is out, and in his place is a guy coming from the Denver Broncos who it was under Vic Fangio for a year or so. In Denver. I think a guy who coaches at the college level as well. He's going to be going out to L.A., the inside linebackers coach of the Broncos, to be the defensive coordinator of the L.A. Rams. I'll give you the name right now, but I really think that Sean McVay is hiring a terrific staff. Shane Waldron gets to stay out there in L.A. Shane Waldron, of course, comes from the Patriots, Notre Dame. Shane Waldron is the pass game designer. He designs plays for Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. You have Todd Gurley being hurt, but the new defensive coordinator of the Rams is going to be, I'll tell you who in a second. It is Brandon Staley. And this is an exciting hire. This guy looks young. He's 37 years old. He is an understudy of Vic Fangio, so I'm just reading things about this dude. Okay. Good job, and he helped Sean McVay kind of transfer to the NFL, but the Rams defense hasn't been the same. I mean, Tampa Bay lit them up. San Francisco, both games had their way with the Rams. So I think that a new change of pace for a team who won a Super Bowl, I really think that this is a decent move. And then the LA Rams, their offensive coordinator last year, I know Sean McVay was their offensive coordinator, but they hire Kevin O'Connell. So let me think about the LA Rams. Maybe Shane Waldron was elevated to offensive coordinator, but the point is that I think they said it was Aaron Kromer was, kind of considered their offensive coordinator, but now the Rams are going to be getting Kevin O'Connell, and O'Connell did a really nice job with Dwayne Haskins. He was out with the Chicago Bears for a while. The Cleveland Browns. And basically, Sean McVay knows John Gruden. He knows Jay Gruden really well. And Kevin O'Connell, for a long time, was the understudy of Jay Gruden. So the Grudens, Shanahan was on Jay Gruden's staff. So I'm sure that these two actually might have interfaced in their time in Washington. And they should be very familiar with each other. And for Kevin O'Connell to go back out to Southern California, where the guy is from, he went to play quarterback at San Diego State. O'Connell is a young, dynamic offensive mind, but he also has a great personality about him, similar to Kevin Stefanski. Guy can light up a room, guy can also control a room. And with Dwayne Haskins and with the Redskins ending up with Bill Callahan, for O'Connell to be there and for O'Connell to stabilize Haskins' second half of the season here with Terry McLaurin and stuff for last year, I believe, too, that the Redskins had Alex Smith. Smith got hurt last year, but the Redskins were having success. And this guy, O'Connell, is a rising star. I believe he'll be a head coach pretty soon in this league. O'Connell is a guy that really is a positive leader, a good leader, and this guy just has all the personality skills you would want. He's a kind, nice guy, but also a good, diligent worker. He's young, and he brings energy, and that's important in a coach, is to be kind of a guy that can help out your players, be a player's coach, be a little strict when you need to, but this is a guy that players really like playing for, and a guy that also simplifies the offense and inspires confidence in players. So I think O'Connell is a great hire. He was being courted by the Browns if McDaniels would have went there, and also the Eagles. Mike Rowe was released, so he would have been an understudy of Doug Peterson. Instead, O'Connell opts to go out with Sean McVay to L.A. I think that's a great move for KOC in the long run, too, because you saw Zach Taylor get a job. Who else was the guy that was working in L.A.? LaFleur also was working under Sean McVay as well, then went out to Tennessee as a coordinator. Other news, Patrick Graham, New York Giants defensive coordinator. He was a guy who worked in Miami. He also worked for the Patriots for several years. I'll pull up all his data. The cool thing about Patrick is he's a Connecticut guy, so you again bring in more Northeastern kind of attitude. Patrick Graham, too, is funny, self-deprecating personality. So while Joe Judge might not have a sense of humor, Patrick Graham does have a sense of humor. And Patrick Graham was making fun of his weight, very self-deprecating, saying, I'm kind of a heavy-set guy, I'm kind of a little fat, but I also am a middle child, and that's why I got to bring energy and be loud. So I'm telling you, the players are going to love playing for Patrick Graham. I know that Minkah Fitzpatrick left the Dolphins early in the season, and he was complaining because Patrick was having him play multiple roles, but this is from the Flores Patriots tree, and Patrick Graham's a guy that Joe Judge has worked with for a while. And can you make, chickens with chicken soup or whatever that analogy is? How much can you do with how less? And Patrick Graham didn't have a lot in Miami in terms of talent, a lot of new guys. And the Dolphins still played really well on defense. Against the Steelers, they defended. Against the Patriots, they played their ass off and got a win late in the season. Against Buffalo, they played pretty well. So this is a group that does multiple things. So I think Patrick Graham could be a decent hire. It's a Joe Judge hire once again. So I just hope that Joe Judge, I think that this hire is a good hire. I don't want a Matt Patricia type, but I think that Joe Judge is going to be a better leader than Patricia. And I think that the Giants, with their ownership, with the resources, I think they'll end up being better than the Dolphins, because I think that Joe Judge will inspire more than Matt Patricia will inspire. You don't want Joe Judge to be like Bill O'Brien or Matt Patricia, but Patricia doesn't really deal with the offense. He's kind of just dealing with the defense. And Patricia is not a guy that's a great leader. He's not all around the building. He's not buzzing around. Patricia and Adam Gase are too similar. They're a little. They're not. They don't speak up enough. And I think that Patrick Graham, even though he doesn't have that great of he doesn't have that much experience as just a DC, he's still been moving up the ranks. And this is a guy from Yale that has an Ivy League education, is an intelligent guy, and we're going to have to see, because Joe Judge has his fingerprints on everything right now, and with Joe Judge, I am comfortable in this process. Richard would have been pretty good, but the thing I like about Patrick Graham is that he'll change the scheme based on opponent, and again, he didn't have that much talent to work with in Miami, and this is a hire that is strictly a Joe Judge hire. And I think that it's a good one by Joe because, again, you're accompanying Joe with his staff. Instead of Shurmur just going out and hiring Betcher, instead of Spagnuolo working with McAdoo, those two ships weren't going in the right direction. Joe Judge oversees every facet of the building. And that's the thing that Shurmur and McAdoo were awful at. They didn't give a rat's ass about their defense. They just gave all the power to Spagnuolo. They gave all the power to the front office, and they gave all the power to Jerry Reese, or they gave all the power to then James Betcher. And Shurmur wasn't checking in. He wasn't checking in on the scheme. With Joe Judge, no stone is left unturned. Let's talk about Pat Shurmur. Shurmur ends up going to Denver, which for Shurmur, Shurmur, of course, he's going to want the Denver job. You have Cortland Sutton, you have Philip Lindsay, you have Mike Munchak, and an offensive line with Dalton Reisner that is really getting better, okay? That is actually getting better. McGovern, I think, at center had a good season. So I really think that you look at the tackles, though. Garrett Bowles struggled, but Garrett Bowles is still, I guess, young and can still have a high upside, even though he holds all the time, and he's not been playing that well. But the point is that Drew Lock is an exceptional, talented quarterback. He's the next great quarterback in this league. I mean, his arm talent, his ability to throw on the run really could be a special quarterback. Clutch quarterback, loves playing in big games. And for Shurmur, this is a great job for him. But for Denver, Scangarello is just starting to get it going. Kevin O'Connell comes from the Jay Gruden tree. O'Connell would have been a perfect coach for Drew Lock. And in fact, O'Connell would have actually been a great coach in waiting after Fangio would ride out the next 5 or 6 years. And the fact that they go and hire an older Pat Shurmur. Shurmur's not dynamic in terms of his motions. He's not dynamic as a play caller. I was a Giants fan. Of course, I am a Giants fan, so I can see what Shurmur can devise. And the guy does not devise good game plans and good schemes to get people open, okay? Against the Redskins, yes, Daniel Jones had success. But there were so many times when they needed deep throws, and Shurmur's just way too cautious. And with Cortland Sutton, with Drew Lock, this could really be just a dull offense. And that's what Shurmur is. Shurmur's dull, and it's going to be a dull offense and it's not going to be a high-octane, fun, spread it out, throw the ball all over the yard type offense, which is kind of why I wanted a guy like maybe the guy on the Browns staff who was on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm trying to think of that offensive coordinator that was there. Let me think about this one. But Todd Monken, and Todd Monken right now is on the open market. So, but anyway, I don't love that Shurmur hire for Denver. I think it sucks. I think he's overrated as an offensive coordinator. He was only an OC with Case Keenum, and that team was again led by George Edwards and Mike Zimmer. So if you look at Shurmur's track record, if you look at Shurmur, he wasn't a good coach with the Cleveland Browns, and I think he's a very overrated offensive coordinator. And Shurmur now doesn't really have an excuse to fail because he's dealing with Drew Lock, okay? So with the the Minnesota Vikings. He was then a tight ends coach. He was the OC in Philadelphia, but that was Chip Kelly, okay? That was Chip Kelly. That was the hurry-up offense, and that really phased out. So Shurmur wasn't really calling the plays or doing anything. With the Rams, he was an offensive coordinator going back to 2009, but Pat Shurmur as the Philly offensive coordinator, not really dynamic. As the Vikings offensive coordinator, that 1 year that everybody talks about. I mean, he had Brandon Whedon, Case Keenum, that Vikings offense was just okay, and you also had Diggs and Thielen, and this Vikings offense under Stefanski was so much better than the 2017 offense, just statistically and just with Kirk Cousins and how dynamic that offense was with Stefanski, how many points they would put up. I mean, Kirk Cousins in Seattle going toe-to-toe with Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins blitzing the Eagles. So that year, the defense was incredible. Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph Hunter on that defensive line. So the fact that Shurmur was the interim coach for the Eagles, he then was poor with the Browns. Chip Kelly, he was there on the staff, but Chip Kelly was controlling the Eagles for 2013 to 2015. What exactly are the great resume boosters for Shurmur? Where exactly is he dynamic? He doesn't have any connection to Shanahan or Gruden or the McVay tree, and he's not going to be utilizing motion. You could have hired Kellen Moore. You could have went out there and hired somebody really good and dynamic. Instead, you settled on Shurmur. And for Matt Nagy, I know Nagy wanted Shurmur also. That would have even been more fair because Nagy worked with Andy Reid. Nagy would call the plays, and Shurmur would be strictly an assistant, kind of like Chad Morris is with Gus Malzahn, and they both knew each other from their time in Philadelphia, Nagy and Shurmur. So Shurmur in Chicago. But now Shurmur, he understands that Drew Lock is talented. He wants to coach Drew Lock. So for Shurmur, it's great. But for Denver Bronco fans, I think this could be risky. You could be looking at maybe hiring an offensive coordinator after this year. And actually, if this team just sucks in general, then you might want to go out and hire a Kevin O'Connell. You might go out and hire a Nick Cafee or something from the Patriots. You could fire Fangio. If the second year doesn't work out and this offense sucks, you got to consider firing Fangio for making this hire, which is just an old school hire, just hiring another old guy to come into the building. And I'm just not excited about. I mean, Denver, I love the prospects of Denver, but this hire could derail Denver because you have to compete with the Chiefs, the Chargers, and then who's the last team that is it? The Oakland Raiders that are coming up as well. And Scangarello is just trying to find his footing with Locke. So replacing Scangarello with a guy who I think is even worse in Shurmur, I just think that that's a brutal mistake for the Denver Broncos. It's going to cost them big time. You know, they won't even look at the wide receivers coach for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm just not enthused at all about the hire of Shurmur. I don't think he's a good OC. I think that that's just such a convenient line for people. When someone's not a good coach, they could say he's a good coordinator. Just trying to somehow, I guess, double down on their point, so to speak. But, so many people say not a good coach, good coordinator, like those two go together whatsoever. Mike Pettin is a good example of that, but not everybody is. Sometimes you're just not that good. Look at DeFilippo, kind of overrated. I thought he would do better in his role with Cousins, and now you saw in Jacksonville a poor season, and he's gone again. So he'll be back to being a quarterbacks coach. DeFilippo had two opportunities there. So that's that, guys. Those are kind of the new hirings in the NFL. Kellen Moore's going back to Dallas, which is big. I want to see where Richard ends up. Chad O'Shea is out of Miami, and replacing him is Chan Gailey. Other news, Eagles still looking for an offensive coordinator. Could be Jim Caldwell. And we'll see kind of how this develops. I believe that the Bears also looking for someone to add to their offensive staff. Joe Brady says that he's staying at LSU. But I'm excited for Patrick Graham, excited for a lot of these opportunities here. I think Denver got it wrong. I think the LA Rams are doing a great job. I love the Staley hire, and I really love the hiring of Kevin O'Connell with Sean McVay, with Shane Waldron. That is going to be a powerful, powerful offensive room and offensive staff. I like the reload by the Rams. They're not just being complacent and staying still with things. So I really, really like that. It looks like Dable will be back in Buffalo, which for Josh Allen, he gets the continuity to continue. Scangarello being out was a big surprise, and then they really wanted Shurmur, and I think that this Shurmur hire could end up being the worst one. Patrick Graham going to the Giants. Like the hire, it's a Joe Judge hire. I think Graham seems like a wonderful person. We'll find out if he can really coach, but at least he's a wonderful guy. You don't want somebody that's kind of a bad guy, okay? I think Jim Schwartz kind of known as a bad guy. There are some bad guys in the NFL. So that's that. Those are kind of the hiring so far. We'll see what Stefanski does with the rest of his staff. We'll see what Matt Rule does. I'm sure Rule will hire an awesome staff. So things will be official as we go along. The Jags looking for an offensive coordinator. There's so many moving parts happening at every part of this hour. And I want to thank everybody from Rover Sports for listening to the show today, listening to the hires, and I want to thank all of you guys for being here and being patient and listening to me kind of illustrate the news, and I appreciate everybody here for listening to the content and enjoying Rover Sports. So thank you all so much.